Hi there, Christine Weber here. Welcome to my weekly live stream. Today I'm going to be talking about things you can do other than counting when you work on breathing practices. So, the breathing practices have been popularized out there kind of in the mainstream by people like Andrew Huberman and Andrew Weil. I guess the Andrews like breathing practices from yoga. And so you hear a lot of things out there like square breath is the best breath. The Navy SEALs use it. So it must be really good. So you'll hear stuff like that. And square breath means like 4 counts in, 4 counts pause, 4 counts out, 4 counts pause. Or I was watching Ted Lasso a few months ago. If you haven't watched it, you should watch it. It's very cute. And he's dealing with anxiety. He's dealing with panic attacks and anxiety. And at one point, he calls his therapist and he's like, I'm having a panic attack. And she says to him, don't forget your 4, 7, 8 breath. Which makes me go, but anyway. Like, please forget your 4, 7, 8 breath. It's not a good ratio. But anyway, she says that to him. And it just is another demonstration of how these techniques are out there in the culture and they are not appropriate for everybody. They don't work for everybody. And we have to stop making formulaic answers for breathing, giving formulas for breathing, having these formulaic answers to things like panic attacks encapsulated in these breathing ratios, which may or may not be appropriate. So here's the thing to remember. Your breath encodes your biography. Your life is in your breath. The way your breathing patterns have been established have been often based on traumatic things that happened in your childhood. I mean, even when you were an infant, for example, we develop breathing patterns as a way to cope with stuff that's happened to us. Some people have not had a lot of, big T trauma. And so their breathing patterns are adaptive and they work well. And then you teach them, then they become a Navy SEAL and you teach them the square breath and they're like, wow, this works really great. So it must work for everybody, but it's not everybody. Some people have very maladaptive breathing patterns. And then the well-meaning neuroscientist or a famous physician comes along and says, do square breath or do 4, 7, 8 breath. And they have a reaction because the breathing pattern that was set down to cope with a survival situation where they needed to survive. And then the well-meaning, person comes along and says, do this thing, and it triggers them. They go into a trigger because the body feels like, wait a minute, I set up this breathing pattern as a way to survive, and now you're messing around with it. And that can be very difficult for some people. So we have to keep that in mind as we teach breathing practices. And in the same way that I would not prescribe medication for somebody, I think it is important for medical professionals to look to yoga teachers and yoga therapists who are well-trained and have a lot of experience for support in teaching something like breathing practices, because we should be, we can be, and we have the training out there available to be the experts in the field. I remember when the book Breath came out, or Breathe came out, James Nestor, and it's an interesting book. But again, this is someone who went and explored a bunch of different breathing techniques, and he wrote kind of an interesting book about it, although some of it is problematic, but he wrote kind of an interesting book. And, what blows my mind is that we ignore the books and the teachings of the people that have been established in this for decades, or lineages through lineages for hundreds of years. That to me makes sense. It makes sense to look to those people, but somehow in our culture, yoga gets passed off as either some fitnessy thing that you can learn in a weekend, or, some kind of, sort of out there, weird spirituality thing. We don't necessarily see it, and we're not necessarily seeing yoga therapy for the potential that it offers. So today I want to talk to you about how You can find other ways to help people find counting in their breathing without actually using the numbers, because sometimes numbers are very triggering for people too. They don't like math. I don't like it feels too obsessive to me to count. I personally think counting is an incredible way of learning how to do various different pranayama techniques. However, for some people, counting is not the right thing. They need something else. In general, most people do well from lengthening their exhale. So one of the techniques you can do is use a mantra, or it could be in English. I gave you one in the description that's in Sanskrit. It's a really common yoga sutra, Vishoka Va Jyotishmati, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But you could use anything. You could use some kind of rhythmic childhood nursery rhyme. Row, row, row your boat gently down the street. I learned that from my teacher. Gary Crafso likes to use that one as an example. And it does make sense because it's kind of a beautiful little song. And also you can break it up into different parts and it can help you lengthen the exhale. I'm going to show you how it's done more traditionally. Oh, and by the way, traditionally, pranayama is typically done with a mantra. So the mantra already provides, you just kind of have to break it up in your mind a little bit, but it already provides a structure for the breath. So, Vishoka Va Jyotishmati, it sounds like this in Sanskrit, in chanting. Vishoka Va Jyotishmati, and it gives you Vishoka Va 5. Jyotishmati, 5 more, right? And that 5 count in and 5 count out, that's what the research says again and again, that it's 5 in, 5 out is a very good ratio for most people. Again, I never want to generalize, but for most people, that's like an easy amount of time to breathe. So you can do it internally, Vishoka Va, and then exhale, Jyotishmati. That's one way, just practicing 5 counts in, 5 counts out. You can also do inhale, Vishoka Va. Do that a few times. Vishoka Va. You're just practicing the 5 count exhale. And then you can add Vishoka Va Jyotish, and do that a few times. Vishoka Va Jyotish, and then you add mati at the end. So I've done like Vishoka Va Jyotish, 7, 7.5, and then mati is going to make it 10. So Vishoka Va Jyotishmati. And so you've got the rhythm, you've got the counts there. You can make it slower, you can make it longer, you can play with all that, but you're just leaving numbers out of the equation. For some people, Sanskrit feels nice and comfortable and it's easy to learn. Other people are just like, I don't want to learn Sanskrit. So you find something that works for them in English, let there be peace on earth. Let there be peace on earth. It's like a 7 count. They could just say that several times. You could use amazing grace. You could use anything like that works and that has a good count. And the most important thing is it has to be something that resonates with the person. They have to feel like, oh yeah, that works for me. What about the Serenity Prayer? I'm sure there's a song that goes with it. That has to be some kind of song that kind of, or simple, repetitive music. Maybe they like Kumbaya. I don't know. That's easy and that appeals to the person, that has that's meaningful to them, and that's a way that you get around the numbers. So you have to be creative, right? And you have to work with the person to help them to figure out what would be the best kind of chant or song. Yeah, maybe they like Kyrie eleison, I don't know, or Shalom. There's so many different possibilities for mantras that can work. So you be creative with it, explore with the person, find the beat in it, and then you can leave numbers out of the equation. And as I said before, keep this in mind. most people benefit from lengthening their exhale. And if you can do that with numbers, great. And if you want to do it with something that's spiritually meaningful and that doesn't have numbers, then mantra is the way to go. I hope this is helpful. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next week. Oh, I forgot to tell you before I go. Next Friday, we have a brand new course coming out. It's called the Subtle Yoga Breathwork Certification. I decided to do it because I realized there was so much breathing out there that I feel like really could use some help. And I want to help people to learn how to teach breath work in a way that is really meaningful, deep, profound, and safe, because breath work changes lives. So pranayama changes life. So keep an eye out for that. If you're not on the mailing list, feel free to email us and we'll put you on the mailing list, support@subtleyoga.com. Thanks so much for being here. See you next week.